Today I'm going to talk about No Man's Heart by Jamil Jones. I want to preface this review with a reminder that reviews are for readers. So if you are Jamil Jones himself or a friend, family member, I would suggest clicking off if you are not comfortable hearing not so great opinions about this book. I will also link to Jamil Jones's award-winning stories, which he has on his website. So if you want to check him out, check out his award-winning stories or check out No Man's Heart. I will link to a purchase for that in the description below. You might like this if you are a fan of darker sci-fi, slight fantasy. There's a tiny bit of horror in this, but I would mostly call this kind of just violent sci-fi with a post-apocalyptic sheen over the whole thing. The reason that I purchased this book was because I actually came across the author's YouTube where he specifically said that he was a new indie author, or relatively new, and his book was published and it was available for about $3 on Amazon. And so I went and I checked it out and I went ahead and purchased it to support him. I really wish that I liked this book. I unfortunately had a lot of problems with it. I will get into those problems in a lot of detail. I am going to be referring to my notes a lot. So if you see me looking down, please bear with me. To summarize this setting as I understood it, this book follows two siblings in a post-apocalyptic society. Their names are Mia and Leon. They are basically adoptive siblings. The post-apocalyptic has a question mark for me because something called the anomaly has happened. This is part of what the author is calling the Anomaly Rising series. I don't actually know what Anomaly Rising means based off of having read this book, and I don't actually know what the anomaly itself is. It's possibly related to a big asteroid storm that happens in a flashback later in this book, but I actually don't know for sure. And that could absolutely be on me as the reader. I may have completely missed something while I was reading this book. So I take full responsibility if there is indeed a passage in there that I missed. It is very possible that that happened. We have two siblings, Mia and Leon. We follow throughout this book. Mia gets kidnapped pretty early by a group who identify themselves and call themselves Savages with a capital S. And I'll talk about that group and how they're depicted. And Leon is a soldier. I think he was a child soldier, basically was a child soldier, and he is alternately attacked, kidnapped, and at one point dropped into an icy wasteland, which he survives along with the three other people who also managed to survive without any real explanation for how they survived. That's part of the problems that I have with this book, which I will get into. By the end of this book, I had no idea really what I was reading or why I should care. And that ultimately was the fatal flaw for me of No Man's Heart. Now, before I get into real specifics, I do have to say I really like the cover of this book, and I like the pull quote that is included on the cover of this book. I think that it's just really evocative. So the pull quote is, "Stealing a heart is easy, crushing it is the fun part." That's great. I love that. And that is a quote from the book. Mia actually thinks that at one point. The problem is that there's nothing that she actually does to back that up. She specifically is thinking that about the man she has been coerced into marrying and this clan of savages called Calamity Clan, and how she's going to spend time essentially wheedling her way into their structure only to destroy it. And she's coming up with all these thoughts in her head of how she's going to do that, and then she doesn't. she just, it's mentioned a few times in a few chapters, and then it's done. I hate saying it, the Savages, capital S, are very Indigenous Americas coded. They carry tomahawks, they have tribal practices or things that could be coded as tribal practices. It's very uncomfortable, honestly, to read, and I was really surprised by that because it's so overt and in your face about that coding. I was just very, very surprised to see that. But that is a huge part of this book. You are with this group who call themselves Savages for the majority of Mia's story. She is essentially a person who was taken by this clan and integrated into their society, fully integrated, as the wife of the chief. He's called the chief of Calamity Clan. There's no transition for that to happen. So she is taken, she is kidnapped violently by this group. Cal, who is the chief of Calamity Clan, kills her grandfather pretty violently in front of her, decapitates him, in fact, in front of her. And then when she is taken to the clan, they put her in a giant mud hole, which they seem to keep their prisoners in mud holes. I'll talk about the mud holes in more detail. But he pulls her out, essentially has fallen in love with her instantaneously. There is no reason given for any of this. There's no emotional connection between these two. She is very angry and upset with him, and then she's not. They get married. I think they call it unified in Calamity Clan. And once they're married, she's pretty fine with everything that's going on. Let me go back. She does take a few chapters to decide she likes him, and there is plot stuff that happens in the middle where she kind of rescues herself. More, they just kind of let her go. I'm all over the place. Let me go back. Mia is taken by Calamity Clan. She is coerced into unifying with Cal, who, for some reason, loves her. Cal's second in command, Glare, does not like this and does not trust her. He also tries to assault her at one point. Cal is obviously upset about that, but it's very much so just a scene for him to walk in and save her from an assault. She doesn't feel kindness toward him because of that. It doesn't even really come up again. It just happens. Once they're unified, there is a point in the story where she sees Leon and all of her previous allies, or some, I should say, of her previous allies. Leon gives her a little, seems like a little bug robot, like one of those drone insect robots that you may have seen the military working on in DARPA and stuff, which is a fun little idea. And that is how she communicates with him. And so she actually is actively working against this group and Calamity Clan for months, or for weeks, I should say. One of the issues with the book is the passage of time is very unclear. There are years and months given at the head of some of the chapters, but not all of them. I really couldn't tell you how much time has passed in between certain events other than, oh, it's been maybe 3 months or what have you. She's hitched to this guy and doesn't like him, then starts feeling a certain kind of way toward him. There's no reason for that. It is just a few months have passed. If I remember, I actually did check at one point. It's from May to August of the same year, I believe. And in that time frame, she has started to fall in love with him, and it's later established has actually fallen in love with him. We don't get to see them falling in love with each other, unfortunately. All that we see is the outcome of her being in love with him and being really upset when he gets badly injured later in the book. One of my really big issues throughout this book is there were a lot of typos. Just straight up typographical errors throughout. So many, and they were so distracting that I started just creating an annotation every time it happened. These are really overt typos. Things that are misspelled, words that are repeated, possessive apostrophes that are missing, conjugations that aren't there. It was really pretty distracting. It's not the worst I've ever read by any stretch of the imagination, and if that's something that you don't really get as bothered by, it may not even register for you. Sorry, there's a fly. It may not even register for you, but I have to mention it. It distracted the heck out of me. The worst issue for me with this book is that it feels more like an outline that the author had written with a little bit of additional context and information for every line of the outline. There are 72 chapters. A lot of those chapters are 2 to 3 pages. There's very little that is established between those pages. So I might start a chapter with Mia and end a chapter with her having had one conversation with one person that didn't really tell me anything. There's also a lot of events that happen with no setup, and therefore there's no payoff emotionally or plot-wise. It feels like a checklist. That's really the better way for me to describe it. It feels like I'm reading through a checklist that the author created for this story, really wanted to hit these specific beats, followed the outline, added a little bit of context and maybe some conversation or additional information, and that's kind of the whole story. There is some good stuff in here in terms of the writing. There's a chapter where we see an asteroid shower that hits, I believe, Mumbai in India. And it's from the point of view of a little girl who's having her birthday, if I remember correctly. And it's really good. I really liked that chapter. I wish more chapters were like that. That chapter felt like a whole story that I was way more interested in following than the story that I was being asked to invest in with Mia and Leon and their respective relationships. I really can't convey enough how little these relationships are established in this book. I am told that they feel certain ways about these people. I am never shown any of that. It is a very much so tell, don't show style. And again, I feel like that's symptomatic of that checklist that I feel was being followed while he was writing this book. So one example I will give about how these relationships don't feel real. Mia has been kidnapped. She was thrown in a mud pit. Her backstory includes some brutality with some outcasts, it turns out, of the Savages clans. I really don't like saying it, but that is what they are called in this book. When she's pulled out of the mud pit by Cal, he starts leading her around the Calamity Clan's living area. I don't know if it's a compound. It feels more like an open village concept. Again, very indigenous coded as well. And she's not bound in any way. Her hands aren't tied. She doesn't have shackles on her legs. She's not a prisoner immediately. Cal has decided he wants to marry her. We don't know why. There's no good reason ever given for that. He just looks at her and decides he wants to marry her. There's some hint that maybe there's a reason for that, like a backstory reason possibly, but that's not specified in this book. This is part 1 of a series. Maybe it'll come up in a later book. This is while she's following him. She's just been pulled out of the mud pit. She's following Cal around the camp. She's not bound. I follow Cal through the brush, passing 2 savages with fishing buckets and spears. This is on page 60. So we're pretty early into the book, and we're comfortable. We don't get a lot of Mia's inner thoughts, and it's written from her perspective. All of the chapters are written from a first-person perspective unless I'm forgetting a chapter or two. But every chapter that we follow is from a person's perspective. But we don't hear what that person is thinking when it's Mia. We do get that sometimes with Leon, not all the time, but I have a better sense of who Leon is as a person at the end of the book. I have no sense of who Mia is or is supposed to be by the end of this book. I do not know this person, and I don't care about her because of that. She doesn't feel like a person. She feels like a check mark. The author wanted this character to marry the Calamity Clan chief, Cal, and therefore she did. There's no reason for her to do this. There's not a really compelling deal that she strikes. She essentially decides to adopt 2 younger children. She's 17 when she's taken and unified with Cal. There's 2 other children who are in that mud pit with her that she becomes very emotionally attached to. Honestly, that's totally fine. I would hope most people would become emotionally attached to children in distress. She decides that she is going to be the person who takes care of them and saves them. This is not treated as a sibling relationship. This is treated as a maternal relationship. And both of these children are over 10 years old, if I'm not mistaken. I'm pretty sure they're both between 10 and 15. If I'm not, actually, I think one of them actually turns 15 in this book, and this book doesn't take more than a year. So this 15-year-old is 3 years younger, because Mia does turn 18 during the book. She's 3 years younger. That's not a maternal relationship. I'm not saying that children can't be parentified and feel maternal toward other children, but it doesn't work because I don't get to know Mia. I don't understand Mia. I don't feel that connection with her. A good comparison is Katniss in The Hunger Games, who is absolutely parentified with her little sister, has a maternal relationship with her little sister. It's very well established. Katniss's relationship with her little sister Prim is the driving force of why she does so much of what she does, especially in the first book, but also in the third book of the original Hunger Games trilogy. So that's a thing. That's something that I can really, sorry, this little gnat. That's something that I can support and get behind and feel. I just didn't feel it here. I didn't feel anything about her relationship with these children other than confusion. Leon, as her older brother, I actually do believe, because we do get a little bit of his thought process. There's actually, now that I think about it, there's an interesting difference between sisters and brothers. There's 2 brother characters that I can think of off the top of my head. Well, there's 3 main brother characters that we get to know throughout the book. One of them is Leon. Another one is, I think he's 0, or is it 1? It's one of Leon's former colleagues as a child soldier, who is the brother to a woman and the nephew of the leader of these child soldier folks. I unfortunately don't remember the name of the forces right now. I really should, because they are a huge part of the book. I just don't remember the names. I think maybe the aunt is actually called 0. Either way, she has a nephew and a niece, and the nephew is obviously the brother to the niece. And Leon and this guy are very protective of their little sisters. I get that. It actually makes a lot of sense to me. I actually feel that connection between them, because you do get a little bit of backstory. You get a little bit of backstory on the colleague. I cannot remember. I feel terrible. I cannot remember his name. But you get a little bit of backstory on nephew and his overprotectiveness of his sister and how his aunt uses that to control him. Great. I love that. Similar with Leon, you actually do get into his head a little bit more so that you can see why he feels the way that he feels about Mia. We don't get that with Mia. The other brother is the Canadian Prime Minister's brother, who performs a coup against his sister to take over Canada. Now, I haven't mentioned Canada because Canada suddenly exists in this book. Again, I don't know what the setting is supposed to be. I don't know if we start in Canada and we were always in Canada. I don't actually know. Canada just suddenly gets name dropped. The country of Canada. So until that point, I thought we were fully post-apocalyptic, different names for countries. We were definitely in North America. I assumed based off of descriptions of things that we were kind of Northeast United States along, or maybe in Canada along the Canadian border, but there was no country name. The main group, I guess, that is running things in what appears to be the United States is the Republic for Freedom, I think. I really should have written these names down. I apologize. I do not remember the names of the factions. I will put them up, but I'll just call them the Republic. It's the RFF is what they go by. I'll call them the RFF because they do get called that in the book. But the RFF is essentially running things in what appears to be the United States. And then Canada has prime minister still. Canada is just Canada. Now, we don't have provinces, or if we do, they haven't been mentioned, but we do have a prime minister. We also have news media. So there's a scene at one point in the book where there's just straight up news media, like paparazzi asking questions of politicians. So again, I thought we were in a post-apocalyptic society. We've been dealing with the RFF. Now we have Canada, and I guess we also have a free press. The press never comes up again, though. They are present for one scene, and that's it. They never show up again. I don't get it. I think this scene really exemplifies a lot of my issues with this book. The leader of the armed forces that Leon is a member of is called One. That's her code name. She is identified by the RFF and other generals who are, again, in what appears to be the United States at this point in the story, as a traitor. She's been explicitly dealing weapons with Canada, and this is where Canada came in. All of a sudden, Canada exists, and we have the ability to do weapons deals with Canada as another country. Totally took me off guard. I actually stopped reading for a moment and said, wait, we have Canada? In this scene, the generals have confronted her about it and told her, we need you to give us your contact for the Canadian arms dealers that you're working with. So now I'm wondering, okay, so is Canada full of arms dealers? Where did Canada come from? Again, One has just been established to be a traitor. She's also a bad person. She runs these forces, and she runs them brutally. She is known for having extremely brutal methods, including things like clearing out camps of everyone, including children, little kids. She doesn't care. She is an ends justify the means, and the means are I want power. That is One as a character. So the generals are talking to her. They tell her, we know you're a traitor. We know you are a traitor. You cannot lie to us anymore. We know for sure you're a traitor. And also, we want you to leave this room and establish a contact with your Canadian arms dealer friends so that we can meet with the Canadian Prime Minister. And they just let her leave the room. They literally just let her leave the room. Nobody follows her. They don't detain her. They don't do anything to ensure that she's going to do exactly what she was asked to do. She just leaves the room. And everything's fine, I guess. So this is a quote from chapter 18 when Mia is being forced to unify with Cal. The deal that she's essentially struck is to protect the two children that she has decided to take under her wing, and that's it. That's essentially the deal. Why Cal wants to marry her, again, completely unestablished. There is no reason given for why he's decided that this woman, this girl, she again is 17 at this point in the book, who is an outsider to their clan, not familiar with them, hates savages on principle because she believes a lot of terrible things about them, many of which are actually true. by the way. This is her thought process in chapter 18. It feels like chains are coiling around my limbs, but I keep my tears at bay, focusing on Cal. My future with him is waiting, whether I want it or not. I remind myself that this is only temporary. Soon enough, I'll have a blade to Cal's throat, and he will beg for his life, but I'll show no mercy. That's actually pretty good. That's not what happens. We don't ever see that because she comes around. She decides she loves being with Calamity Clan. She loves being a savage. She is officially inducted into their clan, and later in the book is really officially inducted into the clan. There is a part later in the book where Mia and Cal are in love. It's been since May to August, and they are in love. That is the time frame that has passed. I don't know why they're in love. They just are. I'm told they are, therefore they are. Glare has been exiled from Calamity Clan at this point because he rightfully called out Mia for being a massive traitor and betraying Calamity Clan to the RFF, leading to an impending attack by the RFF. Later in the book, when Mia and Cal are officially in love, which, again, it's May to August, the time that passes. May to August is the time that has passed for Mia to fall fully in love with Cal, to fall in love with the savage way of life, to consider herself a savage, to want to truly be a part of Calamity Clan. There is no implication that she is still pulling her long con. It is very much so portrayed as, yep, this is her home now. These are her people. This is who she wants to be with. Okay. Glare has been exiled at this point because he rightfully called Mia out for being a traitor. I apologize if you can hear the barking. He's antsy because I'm not where he wants me to be, which is in my office or laying in bed. Glare has been exiled at this point because he rightfully called Mia out earlier for being a traitor after she confessed outright to being a traitor. Cal challenged him to a fight to the death. They didn't end up killing each other. Cal exiled Glare, implication being they were friends. Cal didn't want to kill him. Cal is a pacifist, as much as one can be within the Savages. There's a whole backstory there. But Glare has been exiled, and Glare is obsessed with Cal and Mia and hating them both. He feels that Cal has lost his way. He no longer follows the way of the savage, and Mia was a traitor, admitted as much, and Cal chose her over his friendship with Cal, etc., etc. So Glare attacks Cal at one point later in the book, and Mia is just absolutely devastated. And this was the point where I thought, oh, well, maybe this is part of her long con. Maybe we're still in the long con, because again, I really never got a good sense of who Mia is, of what she wants, of what she feels about anything. But no, she's just portrayed as straight up really, really upset and sad about it, and also pregnant with his children now. She's going to be having twins. Isn't that exciting? Another confusing moment regarding the setting is apparently there's a social network, because there's a quote, or there's a statement in here talking about someone named Henry Ming, the current president of the social network LinkSpace. There are devices called links that people can have. It seems like they're implanted in your head, and you're able to link to people, essentially communicate with them without headsets or walkie-talkies or what have you. I don't actually know if that's what this is. I don't know if that's a product of LinkSpace, if LinkSpace is those attachments or implants, or if it's literally a social network. Because social network implies an internet, and I don't know if we have the internet. We have Canada. We have a prime minister in Canada. We have press, reporters. I don't know if we have news outlets. That was never clarified. But we do have press, potentially free press based off of the questions that they're asked. Totally free press, in fact. And now we may have a social network. I don't know. I don't know how any of this relates to the setting that we're given. There's another quote I want to read, which is Mia reminiscing on Cal and him being good to her and her not knowing why. I still don't understand why he's good to me. I've ruined his reputation and broken his clan apart. My only response to this in my notes was, you and me both, sister. I have no idea why Cal sticks with her. I have no idea what the connection is there. It is never clarified or depicted, other than him just being in love with her, I guess. Something else that I will mention, it didn't come up all the time, but this author tends to use food to describe people's skin colors. At one point, someone is described as having peanut-colored skin, which is one of the weirdest food descriptors for skin I've ever heard. I don't know what that means. Are we talking about the outer shell of a peanut? Are we talking about the dark brown membrane of the peanut, or the pale part of the peanut? I don't know. I don't know what somebody who's peanut colored looks like. This book also has a really hard time with showing passage of time and establishing things. I feel like I've kind of hit on that, but I really can't overemphasize this enough. This is an example of a scene that we jump into after Leon has joined with the Canadian Prime Minister. The Canadian Prime Minister has 2 adopted children. One of them is Jace, who is a young man. That's relevant in this scene because we are suddenly introduced to Jace and Leon being a couple. There was no setup to this. There was no moment prior where we saw any hint of Jace as a character. We didn't meet him before this scene. Some other person comes into this scene and calls Jace Leon's boyfriend, and because I didn't know who Jace was, and I didn't know who this new character was, I didn't know if he was being sarcastic or serious. I didn't know if he was actually saying, this is your boyfriend, or if he was being a sarcastic jerk and being like, oh, it's your boyfriend. It wasn't established, so I didn't know. During this scene, they are discussing the fact that Jace has an infection. There is an infection that may be worldwide. We don't see the rest of the world. We see Canada, or portions of Canada, and I think portions of the United States, Northeast. This infection is called, I think, scorpionitis, because the bacteria look like little scorpions. They have little pincers, which honestly, kind of adorable. I kind of like that. Leon is a person who has this and is something called gifted, which means he's essentially gained powers from this rather than getting sick. Most people get really sick. It's essentially a wasting disease over time as it's depicted. And Jace is really bad right now with this. Now, this is a potentially worldwide infection. This is a major, major issue. In this scene, Leon's grandmother's brother comes in the room, reveals himself to be a medical doctor, says, Leon, I know you have this and are gifted. I'm going to use your blood to treat Jace, your boyfriend. Again, I didn't know if that was serious or sarcastic. Your boyfriend can be cured because of your blood. He does. 2 weeks later, we are back in this room. He has, in fact, cured this scorpionitis, and he tells them, you can't tell anybody that I did this. But also, the Prime Minister, for whom Jace is her son, she holds a big banquet celebrating the fact that Jace is feeling better and didn't die from scorpionitis. And also we have news. I don't understand this. If we have a serious infection that kills lots of people, has killed several people in the backstory of this narrative, etc., why would a cure not be a huge deal? Why is that not all over the news or the social network or something that people would be clamoring for? People know that Jace has this infection. It's not a secret. So now that he's suddenly much, much better, that's something that it seems like a lot of people would be really invested in, especially if the Prime Minister is hosting a big banquet. So she's not hiding the fact that her son has been cured, essentially. We also learn later that Jace's treatment gave him powers, But we didn't learn that at the time. This is a really good example. Things keep happening without establishment, and details are given to us when they're needed for the descriptions that we're getting of the scene in question. Nothing is previously established. It is all just told to you in the scene. Okay, this is what you need to know for this scene to make sense. There you go, done. And that's it. That's how this whole book flowed for me. The final part of this book involves a big conclave, I think is what it's called, with all of the savage clans. There's several of them. They all have banners, which are described in more detail than most things in the book are described. And I don't know why, because we don't do anything with these other clans. We were only ever really stuck with one clan. There is another clan that Cal's father leads. Cal's father hates Cal because he thinks Cal is a loser, essentially. He thinks he's very weak as a leader. He does not appreciate Cal's pacifism or desire for peace. At this conclave, Mia challenges Cal's father, who is called the Almighty with a capital A, which made me laugh every time, to a fight to the death, but not right now because I'm pregnant. And the Almighty accepts those terms. The Almighty is depicted as a real piece of shit. He explicitly killed his wife because he thought she was too weak. He explicitly is fine with Cal dying. He thinks Cal is dead at this point, and he says, good, he sucked anyway. I'm going to adopt Glare instead as my surrogate son because he's much more badass than my actual son was. But he accepts Mia's terms of, let's not fight right now because I'm pregnant with your grandchildren, to which Almighty essentially replies, great, once I kill you then, I will also kill my grandchildren and put their heads on pikes. And I don't actually know why somebody like that would agree to those terms then. If you don't care so hard that you're willing to threaten newborn infants and decapitating them and putting their heads on pikes, I don't actually understand why you would wait at all. It doesn't seem like that's something that you need to do. But he agrees to it. The way that the savages are depicted is very inconsistent in terms of how brutal or not brutal they are. Again, it feels like a checklist. It feels like the author really wanted certain moments to exist, but didn't think about how that actually would change the makeup of these groups or how it would impact how a reader would feel about them. A good example, and I'm going to end on this, Mia's backstory involves having been captured as a 7-year-old by people who are revealed to be savage outliers. It's not clarified, I don't remember, in this book who they are, but they are considered outside of the savage ways. But this group of not savages put her and a bunch of other kids in the standard prison mud hole, then pulled them out and gave them knives and pointed at a pile of human bodies and said, okay, we need you to remove the bones from those bodies. You have to strip them of their muscle and skin. There's no talk of the mud. The mud just disappears. Once you're out of the mud hole, you're not covered in mud. It's not slippery. There's no problem with mud. They are called mud holes, but they just seem to be dry pits. And also, there's no reason for these children to be doing this except because the author thought it would sound cool. That's honestly what it feels like. The author thought this would sound really cool and dark and, oh, isn't it so awful that kids are being forced to essentially clean the meat and skin off of human bones? But why? We don't know why this would happen. Do the savages use them for weapons? Do they use any of these materials? Are they just doing this for fun? It's not clarified. Never comes up again. She doesn't ask about this practice or why this might have been a thing. We just don't learn. We don't learn any of that. That is ultimately my takeaway from this book. Things happen, but we don't learn about why. We never learn the context. We never learn the why. We never learn how things were established, why they were established the way that they are. None of that appears to matter to the author, the story, the characters, and therefore it was really hard for me to engage with this book. Really, really hard. I did finish it. I definitely won't be continuing the series. I don't know that I recommend this book, unfortunately. I do recommend checking his stuff out, especially his award-winning short story. I have not read it yet, but I do plan to. And I will say again, the chapter where the asteroid storm hits and we're following a young girl on her birthday when this happens is, it's so good. It's a really, really good. And so I do wonder if this author is much better at short story style than longer form novels. That's it for today's review. I hope you enjoyed this. If you have read this book, tell me your thoughts. If you haven't read it, I'm not going to tell you not to check it out. It's $3 on Kindle, so you would be supporting an indie author, and maybe you will like it, and tell me how wrong I am. I'm totally open. Scorpileonitis. Scorpileonitis.